Mr Albanese, thanks for your time. After National Cabinet, the criteria for Commonwealth partnership on quarantine facilities was set. Things like being close to the international airports and senior hospitals. In terms of that quarantine process, are there any conditions that you disagree with?
Well, they're making it up as they go along, Kieran. The fact is that this government should have put in place purpose-built quarantine facilities run by the national government as required by our constitution last year. That was the best time to do this. The next best time is right now. These so-called criteria they've come up with contradicts the government's position that it's nothing to do with them and that hotel quarantine's going fine. We know there have been 21 separate outbreaks from hotel quarantine. Hotels were built for tourists. They weren't built as medical facilities. How does it contradict
their position that it's going fine? Because what the Prime Minister wants to do is have these facilities run parallel with the hotel system.
This is a government that always crab walks to a 90-degree turn before it goes 180. We know that the facilities at the moment in hotel quarantine, the outbreak in Victoria has come from Adelaide. We know that 21 separate outbreaks have occurred. And this government had two jobs this year, Kieran. They had to get hotel quarantine right and they had to roll out the vaccine. This is a Prime Minister who can roll out the red carpet for himself but hasn't been able to roll out the vaccine. And
is this now a formal policy of Labor's? To have that national network of quarantine? Is that a formal Labor commitment?
I announced that in my budget reply, Kieran, and I've continued to argue for it consistently. We were saying last year that there needed to be appropriate hotel quarantine facilities, that the government wasn't getting this right. We're expressing our concern. The idea that you put people in the middle of the CBDs of our capital cities is quite clearly a risk. And Jane Holton, what's more, last October presented a report to the government that spoke about purpose-built facilities and expansion of Howard Springs using places like Exmouth in WA. She spoke about fixing hotel ventilation.
But when you say you announced it in budget reply, have you also done the numbers, said exactly how much it's going to cost? Have you got the workforce to staff federal-run facilities around the nation? When you say you announced a budget reply, is there the detail? Is it a formal, detailed policy?
Kieran, we're in opposition. This needs to be fixed now, not wait until after the next federal election, which will occur perhaps as late as May of next year. We can't afford to continue to have these lockdowns. And we've continued to say that the government, federal government, is responsible for quarantine, like it's responsible for immigration, like it's responsible for customs. And one of the things about this Prime Minister is that, and I said this over the weekend, I've had the honour of serving as Deputy Prime Minister and acting as the Prime Minister. This bloke has been acting as the Prime Minister since 2018. He won't accept responsibility for anything.
When you look at when you talk about accepting responsibility, let's look at the Victoria lockdown. The Australian reported yesterday a confidential 47-page Andrews government report showing alarming levels of mental health emergencies among youths in February and March this year. Do our health authorities need to factor in the mental health ramifications of these lockdowns more prominently?
Of course they do. And so does
all of our
society would recognise how tough it is. Well, it's not a blind spot, Kieran. People have been talking about the mental health consequences of the lockdowns for a long period of time. We've had
authorities continue to use language like the virus is a beast and stuff like that. How does that play into a kid's mental health?
Well, the lockdowns themselves, stopping Australians going about their way of life, is really tough. It's one of the reasons why I moved a resolution, you will recall, Kieran, in the Parliament last year, paying tribute to the sacrifice that Victorians were making. They're making a sacrifice right now as well. and it's really tough for them. It's why we should have got quarantine right, Kieran. It's why we've been calling for quarantine to be got right and vaccine to be got right for a year now. The government has had a long time to prepare, and it's been complacent.
Let's look at a few other issues. The Parliamentary Culture Report, Stephanie Foster, the Deputy Secretary of PM&C, 76 complaints, any relating to Labor MPs as far as you're aware?
Well, I don't know, Kieran, because we haven't been told, and you know that. So,
I actually don't. I wasn't aware of that. I was wondering whether you were aware of any of the complaints.
We haven't been told. As you know, Kieran, it was dropped out late on a Friday afternoon. We received a copy. It was dropped down to my office after Parliament rose on Thursday night. Now, you know, if that's the government's idea of appropriate consultation with the opposition, then I find it extraordinary. We haven't been briefed on the report before it was dropped out. No briefing has been offered, and I think that's unfortunate. What's very clear is that it needs to be a priority of the Parliament to look after our staff. It's clear that there haven't been adequate procedures put in place. There's uncertainty about how people go about making complaints and about
if any of the allegations are sustained, should they be made public? If any of them have been sustained against MPs, should they be made public at that point?
Kieran, it would be completely inappropriate for me to comment on something that I haven't seen in terms of any of the detail, and you wouldn't expect me to, surely.
Richard Marles told Sky News, we don't want to stand between anyone and a tax cut in relation to stage 3 tax cuts. When will Labor commit to keeping those, if that's his view?
Well, low and middle income earners will always be better off under Labor, always. We are concerned about the fact we've had 8 years of wages not going up, and we've had wages in terms of the next 4 years will actually go down in real terms. The interview you've done with Jane Hume this morning, just listening to the excerpts, it's quite clear she's opposed to an increase in superannuation up to 12%.
And are you opposed to the stage 3? Will you repeal them? If not, when will you commit to keeping it?
They'll get through the election, and one of the things that we said about the stage 3 and their tax policy, in 2019, we said it was a triumph of hope over experience to say that the government knew what the economy would look like in 2024. And haven't we been proven correct, Kieran? This was at a time when the government said that there'd be a surplus that year, and every year into the future, they a surplus. We have $1 trillion of debt. We have red ink as far as you can see.
Yeah, but so
we have a
when will you commit to keeping those tax cuts?
Well, we'll make our announcements well before the election of all our tax.
So there's still a question mark.
And all of our expenditure. Kieran, the same answer that I've given every time I've been asked once a fortnight, but it's been quite right. We've been absolutely right to not make decisions in 2019 about what the economy would look like in 2024.
Richard Marles sounds like he is.
We know that the projections from this government are for reduced wages, low growth, low productivity, lower workforce participation, and that's before we build in the potential for shocks such as what we're seeing at the moment with the Victorian lockdown.